What exactly is a bowed tendon? What causes a bowed tendon? What's the rehab protocol? And what are the effects on future soundness or any athletic restrictions?
Kind of another thoroughbred question, because we think of bowed tendons in racehorses. The horse I had before Newman was a racehorse from the track, and I got him because he had a bowed tendon, so it's very classic. So we should talk about what it is, because that's kind of a layman's term, a nickname.
Sure.
And it's a breakdown in tissue of the superficial digital flexor tendon.
Yeah.
And
easy
that,
for you to say.
I practiced. And that runs on the back of the leg, the cannon, from the knee to the ankle. And it's the outermost tissue that you'd find. It's the skin and then the tendons right there. And that breakdown, the injury can happen anywhere on the length of the leg, and it can happen the whole length of the leg if it's really bad. So she asked what causes it, and it can be from one misstep, or it can be from a accumulation of sort of wear and tear, and poor conformation, uneven footing, not being trained or conditioned or fit for the activity that you're doing.
Perhaps improper stressful shoeing.
Yep.
Could put additional strain.
Just your foot, the balance and the angles not being right. It's unbalanced loading of that tissue. I mean, it's tendon, it's strong elastic tissue, but it has limits of how elastic it is and how strong it is.
I mean, I think just like the word you're using to describe it, elastic. You can stress elastic too much and you can break it.
Right.
And this is exactly the same thing when we're talking about.
And so it can be damaged, it can be stretched, but no actual fiber tearing. It can have a little bit of tearing, or it can tear completely. So there's a range of injuries that can be involved. And the way you know that is a little bit the sign. So it's the heat, swelling, and pain. But sometimes these horses can even have pretty severe bows and not be lame. But if you have the heat, the pain, the swelling, especially in that leg, it just doesn't look or feel right, because you're always palpating your horse's legs right before and after rides. You should contact your vet, because not only will they palpate it with more expert fingertips, but they have the ultrasound. And the ultrasound is the best way to assess the damage, because they can look inside at the quality of the fibers themselves, look for any core lesions or areas where the fibers are completely separated, and inflammatory fluids, blood and cells have filled in the gaps. And that ultrasound, so now let's move into the rehab part of it, is useful about every 4 to 6 weeks or a month or every 2 months as you're rehabbing. And while I would love to give you a rehab protocol, it all depends on your horse and what caused the injury, and what's available to you. Like if you have an underwater treadmill, super, but not everybody does. It depends on, just the nature of the injury. So if it's a really severe injury, it's going to take a long time. I will say this, one thing we learned a lot of things in vet school, but one thing about this was,
Here's hoping.
People think of fractures, bones, as being really bad, terrible, the worst thing that can happen. Actually, because what we were talking about before, the nature of the cells and the elasticity of the tendon, that the soft tissue, the tendons and ligaments, are worse. And they gave us a rule of thumb that the number of letters in the word is how many months it takes to heal.
Ooh.
So bone, help me out here, B-O-N-E, right. And then tendon is 6.
Okay, 6, thank you.
And ligament
is more than 6.
So these can sometimes take, tendons and ligament injuries can sometimes take 6 months, 8 months, a year before the horses return to normal. And then we have the question of, are they ever going to return to normal?
Right.
Some do, some don't. Nowadays we have, in addition to the great imaging with the ultrasound, so we know what's going on, and you can sonogram that tendon before you start the next phase. So first it's stall rest, and then hand walking, and then under saddle work or tack riding, under tack, and then you add in trotting and you add in cantering, and you also have to consider your circles and corners and transitions. All those things can be stressful on soft tissues. But before you increase the plane of exercise, you can sonogram and see how well the tissue is healing and restructuring. Is it organized or is it haphazard, which would be bad. So in addition to advanced imaging, We also have like shockwave therapy. Regenerative medicine has proven fantastic for healing of tendons, and that's things like stem cells and PRP and IRAP that you can inject right in there. But I mean, there's laser therapy, there's the TENS, there's massage and heat once it's in the further stages. So there's lots of techniques that you'll want to talk to with your veterinarian, in addition to the time frame and what you should be doing activity-wise at each week. What additional modalities can be added on to encourage the normal healing, and also having the building blocks of normal tissue available when they need to heal is really super important. So this is something you'll want to work closely with your veterinarian in that rehab.
When you talk about the building blocks of normal tissue, if we're talking about a bowed tendon, for example, what are some of those things that you might look for to be supplying that horse with?
Well, I think the number one thing, because this is what it's made of, is collagen. And collagen is protein, it's amino acids, and so you want to have that there really for any healing process, but for soft tissue, for tendons and ligaments, that's extraordinarily important. And then there's some minerals. You can have some agents that just promote or support normal inflammation. Like, you want some inflammation, but you don't want excessive inflammation. So things that might help the horse be more comfortable, especially in that stall rest portion, you know, where they're stuck inside, and so things like devil's claw or yuck or boswellia, all those things that sort of manage the tissues and the fluid's normal response would be helpful.
So if you guys are dealing with a horse who has that kind of a situation, and you're in that sort of situation as you're working with your veterinarian, we do have some supplements that contain things like collagen or supportive ingredients for a horse on stall rest, including calming, which I think we can all agree is a little bit helpful when you're dealing with that. So you're always welcome to call our customer care team. Our supplement experts would be happy to help give you some options to talk with your vet about. One thing you talked about in that response that I just want to touch on is if you would show your hands palms up, you can see the difference. She has expert fingertips, and I have very novice fingertips, and you can very clearly tell the difference. That's why you're so good at the palpation, and I'm just a layman.
Gotcha.
I love it. I think that is one of the things. I like when you said you learned one thing in vet school.
I learned one thing in vet school. Like
many things.
Two things.
Yes, expert fingertips, and then the number of letters in the word.
Yep, never
At
forgot
least
that.
you don't have to count superficial or deep digital flexor tendon, because all those letters.
That's a lot.
That's a long time.
Maybe that's the weeks.
Oh, that's fair.